The text has just been read, 1 Timothy 5, 8 through 16, reveals that there are three classes of widows here, and of the three, the church is obligated to provide care for only one class. The first class, back in verse 4 and verse 8 also, is the duty of the individual, the man, and verse 16. So in verse 4, verse 8, and verse 16, the individual is to take care of his own widows. Verse 4 talks about the person has a mother or a grandmother. And verse 8, if a man will not provide for his own. In verse 16, a brother or sister has widows to relieve them. The second class of widow is the younger widow. And Paul taught that the younger widow is to be refused. The church is not to provide regular, permanent care for her. And the reason is that she'll be an idle person going about from house to house. She'll become a gossiper. Sometimes it would be a widow woman to be a gossiper, of course. Well, that's the point they're talking about. If they're not working, they could do that. And so they must, first of all, marry again and bear children and keep the house. Then the third group of widows is the widow indeed who is 60 years old, having been the husband of one wife, having had children, and so on. And this person who is destitute and in need, the church is to relieve her. So this sets before our minds three classes of needy people, and only one the church is obligated to care for. So this shows that the church is not obligated to provide care for everybody. Now, sometimes people think that the church is just to engage in unlimited benevolence and care for everybody. And that has been practiced by some churches through the years, and of course it's brought problems when churches do that. Tonight we want to conclude the series of sermons we have on the work of the church. We know that God has assigned to the church the great and primary work of saving souls. You can feed all the hungry bodies and clothe all the naked bodies, and still, if they have not the soul-saving gospel preached to them, it avails nothing. So feeding the hungry and clothing the naked is only a secondary work, and a work that is provided for those in need. The very primary work and the main mission of the church is preaching the gospel. Christ came and died, shed his blood to procure salvation. And you can take care of needy people without the blood of Christ. So the blood of Christ is for the remission of sins, and the primary mission of the church is to make known this gospel to save the lost. And the work of edification is another work to edify and build up those that are saved. So as we said a while ago, the secondary work then is providing care for those who are members. They are to be provided for, but today churches get involved in that kind of work and spend more time in caring for the needy and social activities, recreation, entertainment, ball teams, hospitals, and things of that nature, and spend all the Lord's money for a work that wasn't the main mission of the church in the first place, and neglect in preaching the gospel. If they do not stop that type of thing, won't be long that the church will just play out and become a human denomination like all other social churches today. It's going the social route. It'll end up in the same place that they are. And, of course, the gospel of Christ will not be preached and souls will not be saved. Tonight, we want to continue and conclude the series of lessons to get before our minds once more what the issue was not and is not, and what the issue is today. We again review some matters. First of all, what the issue was not 150 years ago or more, back in 1849, when the first missionary society was accepted and brought into churches of Christ, for churches to contribute to it out of the church treasury, for it, the man-made missionary society, to preach the gospel. The issue was not, should the gospel be preached? All agreed to that. It was not with the church to support the preaching of the gospel. Or could churches cooperate in the work of preaching? Could a place be provided and maintained? Not a matter of how, whether you walk, ride, sail, or fly, the tent, or otherwise. So these things were not the issue over churches sending support to missionary societies, human organizations. And the issue was not, back in the 20s and 30s, when churches of Christ began to send money to schools and colleges, such as David Lipscomb and others, should members be edified, because we all know the church is to edify the members. Was the church for education for members, or could churches cooperate in the work of edification? Could a place be provided and maintained? Not a matter of how, where you have classrooms, or you have one class or many classes, where you have teaching aides. These things are not the issue over churches sending support to colleges or human organizations. And the work of benevolence that began after World War II to become an issue. They had been opposed for a long time, but not with a one united voice with many people involved. But the great men before us and debaters before us all have said that, of course, that all this standard fall together. There's a parallel between the Missionary Society and the Benevolent Society. Both are separate organizations other than the local church that churches are working through. So the issue was not then, is not today. Shall the needy have care? For all of us believe that. No one believes a little needy child should run around unclothed and unfed and not be provided for and taken care of. Or a widow will turn out in the street and not have her rent paid or hospital bill taken care of. No one believes that, nor teaches that, nor practices that. You name me one person that believes it or practices it, and I'll go look at him and talk to him and tell him straighten up. Now they're trying to make you think that, but that just ain't the issue. So the shall the needy have care? Is the church to provide the care for the needy? Can churches cooperate in the work of benevolence? Can a place be provided and maintained? Not a matter of how, whether you rent a house, buy a house, and who you get to take care of. These things are not the issue over churches sending support to benevolent corporations or human organizations. All down the line. Here's a human organization. Here's a human organization. Here's a human organization. All these, the very work, and the next point number 2, is just simply this. You might go ahead and put them on there and I'll just call them off. All right, the next thing, what the issue it was and what the issue is today. Now, what the issue was before in preaching the gospel, could local churches support, help build and maintain missionary societies, man-made bodies, other than the church, the one body, through which to do their work of evangelism. Now that was the real issue then. It caused trouble and brought division. We have the Christian church today as a result of it. And in edification. Back when they were talking about churches supporting colleges and schools to teach the Bible, it was not in the issue was, could local churches support, help build and maintain schools and colleges, that is, edification societies, a human organization with a board of directors oversee them, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and so on, through which to do their work of edification. That was not the real issue then, and it caused trouble, and now it's arisen again, and churches once more are contributing because they slipped in. They were talking about this, and they lost the battle back in the 40s, after World War II, when the presidents, N.B. Hardeman, was trying to get the church to support Freed Hardeman College. 4W Wallace, or 4E Wallace, and Cled Wallace, and others, in the old Bible banner, just cut the rug out from under his arguments, and he finally got on the limb, and Cled said, we're going to saw the limb off now. He sawed the limb off and let Brother Hardeman fall. He fell hard. He stopped the discussion. He was whipped. I read the discussion, no doubt about it, and everybody knew that. So they immediately began to talk about, well, if you can't support the missionary societies, or if you can't support the schools, you can't support a human organization to take care of the needy. So they said the orphan home and the schools stand or fall together. Well, that's what Hardeman said. And the brethren said, that's right. They allowed them to pull a shenanigan. They allowed them to move from something where there was no emotional issue to an emotional tear-jerking issue, poor little helpless orphans, and the result was trouble came, of course. And people began to close their minds to Bible teaching, didn't want to hear about this because you don't believe in taking care of the orphans, poor little orphans, and not a one would be neglected at that time or are there today. But it's an emotional issue. It caused problems. So, in benevolence, could local churches support, help build, and maintain benevolent societies, man-made societies, through which to do their work of benevolence? That is the real issue. It was, it is now. It is causing trouble. It's brought division. The root of the trouble, of course, in all of this is a matter of authority. If we had Bible authority for this, we'd have it for this, we'd have it for this. There's no Bible authority for any of them, so the attitude toward authority and where's the book, chapter, and verse is the real issue behind all of it. So the benevolent home, the taking care of the needy, is just a sickness. It's a symptom that you have something wrong with you. You go to a doctor, you have a headache. He has to look for the cause. The orphan home, the college, Missionary society is just a headache. It's just a symptom of a cause, and the cause is you don't ask for a book, chapter, and verse for all you do in religion. When you go back to where does the Bible teach it, what does the Bible say about it, that's a disease, a lack of authority. All right, next chart. So we notice then that what the issue is, number one, the local church. In Philippians 1 and verse 1, the local church of elders and deacons and members is divine in origin, exists by God's authority, exists by authority of Christ, it's regulated by the Bible, the New Testament, so we're seen by the elders. Now down here, the charitable institution, the man-made institution, it's a corporate body. Now this is a body, and this is a body. One body plus another body makes two bodies. The Lord said that the church is the body, let it relieve them. But men have made a corporate body, human in origin, exists with the authority of the state where it's chartered, regulated by the state law under which it lives, and controlled by a board of directors. Now here's the work to be done, relieving the needy. Provide the place to live, provide the necessities of life, food, clothing, and shelter, provide personnel for supervision, care, and so on. Now which did God specify, the local church or the charitable institution? The Bible said let it relieve them. So the Bible shows the church is to do the work, but churches today are just sending the funds, turning the work over to this body for it to do the very thing that the church itself ought to be doing. So if we spent more time in telling the church and members their duty, we would be much better off. All right, next chart, please. Now the work of the church, briefly. Here's evangelism. We gave the scriptures the other night showing that the church is to preach the gospel. The essentials have a place, necessary facilities, and personnel. The organization, the congregation, its own agency to do the work, and excluded all other organizations such as missionary societies and so on. In the edification, the church edify itself. There must be a place, necessary facilities, personnel, organization, the congregation, its own agency to do the work. All other organizations are excluded, such as schools, colleges, and etc. In benevolence, the church is to relieve them. Place, necessary facilities, personnel are included. The congregation is its own agency to do the work. So excluded all other organizations such as home for old folks, orphan, unwed, mother, and so on. The church is able, capable, and all sufficient to do all the work assigned, authorized by it by the head, Christ Jesus the Lord. And when we deny that and we'll turn it over to these other organizations, we are saying that the church that God gave can't do the work God gave it to do. And reflecting on the wisdom of God and the power of God. Saying God didn't know how to do it, and Satan didn't have the power to do it. But God was wise enough to design the church to do its work, and a man-made body, therefore all of them are excluded when the church is included. All right, the next chart. Now God's ways for the local church, elders to oversee, direct, and control all the work of evangelism, edification, and benevolence. And the local church is all sufficient. Now man's way. Look how man has changed this pattern and plan. The next chart, please. All right, now which? Yes. Next of all, which one did God authorize? As for organization, as officers, administration, or funds. All right, now which one did God say? Did he say the church, or a charitable institution or corporation, or man-made body? 1 Timothy 5:16 said, let it, the church, the organization, have been specified just as gopher wood to build the ark out of. All right, who about the officer? Who's to oversee the organization? Elders are a board of directors. The Bible said that they ordained the elders in every church. Elders oversee the flock of God. And we find that took care of the needy, Acts 11 verse 30. Who is to administer or to minister and serve the needy? Well, is it the deacons or the superintendent, matrons, house parents, and so on? The Bible specifies that the deacons minister to those in need in the church in Jerusalem. How do you get the funds for the organization to function? Members and churches sending to another church, or churches into another church, or individuals, Social Security, pension, farm income, business enterprises, churches. So over here on this side, you find this is how they receive the money. All of us can see that the church, elders, deacons, and members, and a church, our churches sending to help us when we are in need is a divine pattern. This is authorized, and this is not. All right, look how man's ways therefore change it. Man's way wants local churches to turn their dollars and turn their work and turn the oversight to the human organization under a board of directors. and for it to do the work of preaching, edification, and benevolence. Now, they're doing the work for the churches, so where is the authority? Where's the book, chapter, and verse for churches to turn their work, their fund, oversight to the man-made body under a board of directors to do the work for them and reflect upon the wisdom and power of God? All right, chart number next, whatever it is. Now here we want to point out that the local church is the organization. The local church, and here's the organization, and here's the work. Now the organization is not the work. When churches contribute to a missionary society or a benevolent society under a board of directors, and it in turn does the work of evangelism or edification or benevolence, this is the organization. It exists before the work is done. As I mentioned in debate I had one time, I debated about the Schultz Lewis home in Valparaiso, Indiana. It had an organization. It organized in 1948 and had its officers, board of directors, and even a superintendent, and at that time did not even have a house, much less any children. And the superintendent went around traveling, begging churches to give him money so he could raise money to build a house, and then they looked for some orphans somewhere they could find them. The organization existed till 1955. At that time, they built the first house and the first place. In the fall, they scoured the country and finally found 5 kids up in Michigan, not even in the state of Indiana. It began in Indiana, in Valparaiso, and the church in Valparaiso, in that area there was not anybody to take care of. Had to scour the country and find somebody we all for ourselves. It's an organization that wants to make money. As I said in the bulletin this morning, they are in the money-making business. Now that don't make it wrong, but it certainly shows why that many of them exist today. And the financial reports, not many of them put out one, but the Bowles Home put out a financial report back in 57. I have a financial report in office. One time they were brave enough to put out a financial report. Brother Gail Order put out one. Gail Order. It showed they took in that year over $400,000, almost $500,000, and spent over $200,000. And the difference was $154,000 profit that year, and still they begged money from churches. Made a profit for over $400,000 given, and of that, $154,000 was left over. I'd like to run a business like that, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Or like you make a living that way? Take $400,000 and make $154,000 out of it? Not bad business, is it? They're in good, big, great business, and the flus, the money, keeps them going. That's why they don't want you to have the orphans. They make money. It's a money-making scheme. That's where they're sprouting up all the country. Every little community wants an orphan home. Up where I was at, they got one at Pocahontas, got one at Paragould, got one at Kennett, 3 up there within spitting distance. Why they got them? To make money. That's why they got them. But as I said, that don't make it wrong. That just shows that is the reason that they have it, is to make money. And next chart, please. What part of their oversight can elders delegate? Now, the elders, the overseers, are the member of the flock, the worship of the church, the work of the church, discipline of the members, and resource of the church. Now, here's a human organization, the board of directors. Here's a sponsoring church. Now, can the local church turn any of this work here over to a board of directors without losing some of its oversight? Or to a sponsoring church? Remember, each church is autonomous, self-ruling, independent, equal, sufficient, and since the whole is equal to the sum of its parts, when any part is delegated, take any part, take the work or take the worship, take the resources, and put it over here to another body, it did not leave the whole left. And that's what's wrong with it. All right, next of all. Providing care for the needy. Somebody said, well, preacher, it's just a matter of how. You're arguing over a method. We're not talking about methods. We're not talking about how you do it. It's not a matter of how. It's a matter of what organization that God specified to do it. It's over organization and not a matter of method or a how. So look at it. If the local church does the work, there's some how that it has to have. You have to have some place to put the needy in it. Whether it's an old folk, whether it's a needy family, whether it's an orphan, with a naked child, whoever it might be, their responsibility. They must have a place. It might be a private home, rent a house, buy a house, build a house, provide shelter, food, clothing, medicine, care, supervision, and so on. But if the church turns that work over to a board of directors, what do they have to do? The same thing. Have to have a house, shelter, food, clothing, the very same thing that the church would have to do, this man-made body has to do. So once you turn the work over to a man-made body to do the same thing you have to do, just let the church under the elder take care of the whole thing in the first place, and let God be glorified in the church. All right, the next chart, please. What a local church can do. Now, brethren have said that the church is its own organization to preach the gospel, or its own, as Brother Guy Wood says, he said, now the church is its own missionary body to preach the gospel. But he said the church is not its own benevolent body to care for the needy. That's the very way that they try to debate this issue. They say up here that the church in preaching is its own missionary body to preach the gospel. But that the church is not its own benevolent body to take care of the needy, but all the church can do is just supply the funds to a home that's been restored for it to do it. Well, let's look at the home just restored a minute. We'll take a minute with that. Now here is a family and it loses the home. So the home is lost by death or by desertion. The home is lost. And they say that the home over here is restored when a benevolent organization goes out and builds a house and puts them in it. That is the home restored. One time I asked a fellow when he said that this benevolent body here, this organization here, when he said that this board of directors overseeing this benevolent body who would build a house and put them in, he said, now this is the home restored. I said, who's the daddy? Well, he said, I guess the board of directors. I said, who's the mama? He didn't have much answer to the mama. He didn't figure who the mama was. I said, the Bible says if a man not provide for his own, he's worse than infidel denied the faith. If that board of directors who started that organization won't build a house and take care of their own, they've denied the faith. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8 says. He couldn't hard chew that. It's kind of hard to chew. But if it's a home, like my home, I am obligated to take care of my own family, my own needs, right? If I build one to take care of what has been lost and try to restore a home, I still have that same duty, don't I? The truth about the matter is, you can't restore a home. To restore means to bring to life again. They can't resurrect the dead, can they? You cannot restore the home. You can make a substitute home. You can substitute a home. Keep spelling now. You can substitute a home. You can't restore it. And so the substitute home may be my home or your home, and the only thing about it is that the home can't be restored. And if this is the restored home, these men here are obligated to take care of their own, or those infidel not the faith. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8. Now stand, Lord. If they built too big a bite, got too many kids, they just got too many. They got to do a little planning to take care of their own. Usually about 9 of them. So 9 men, and usually they're wealthy men. 9 men, wealthy men like are over these homes. They make millions, thousands, and some of them millions of dollars. Let them spend a little bit to take care of their own needy. Let them take care of their own. They've made it. The truth about it is, the local church is its own organization, its own missionary body to preach the gospel. But it's not its own meeting house, but it provides or builds a meeting house to preach. The same thing is true of the local church. It's its own organization to relieve. It's its own benevolent body, but it's not its own house or home. It has to provide the home. Now, if the church can provide a building like this to meet him to preach, why can't the same church build a house to put a needy widow in, or somebody else is needy, or buy or rent? Huh? You tell me what's wrong with that. If this can be done, why can't this be done? Why can't the church do both if needed? You can see that the church can do it. All right, next point. Now, the other night we talked about who the church is to care for. Briefly again, we'll notice some more. Now, who is to do the work of relieving? We gave these passages, Acts 2:44 and 45, and Acts 4, and Acts 6, and Acts 11, all these. Now just go back down the line here. Now, who relieved who? In Acts 2, who was relieved? And who did the relieving? Did they relieve saint or alien? And the answer is a saint, a believer. Now, who did the relieving? Did the local church or sponsoring church or benevolent society? The answer is the local church, church in Jerusalem. All right, in Acts 6, who was relieved, the saint or aliens? Again, you can see from reading the context, it was the believer. Who did the relieving? The local church, sponsoring church or benevolent society? Again, you'll find that it was the local church in Jerusalem. All right, in Acts 11, who was relieved, saint or sinner? They sent the money to the needy brethren in Judea. Now, who did the relieving? The local churches there, or the sponsoring church or benevolent society? Well, the local churches took care of their own needy. All right, in Acts 1 Corinthians 16 chapter, or Romans 15, who's relieved, the saints or aliens? Talked about the poor among the saints, the poor saints. And who did the relieving? The local church, sponsoring church, benevolent society. They sent the church in Jerusalem for it to provide for its own need. All right, in 1 Corinthians 16, who's relieved? Saint or sinner? Again, the collection was for the saints. And who did the relieving? Local church, sponsoring church, benevolent society. Again, it was the church in Jerusalem taking care of its needy and had to have some help. Now, 2 Corinthians 9, who in 8 and 9 put both together. In chapter 8 and chapter 9, who's relieved? It was sinners. And who did it? It was local church. In 1 Timothy 5, 9 through 16, who's the church authorized to relieve? And who did the relieving? The saint or alien? Was it will indeed, in verse 3 and 4, show that she's a believer, and she's done this and that in the church. She's a faithful Christian. And now in, where am I, Robert? You lost me.
Yeah.
Go down here. Now I want to know who did the work. The local church, sponsoring church, whatever. It said let it, the church, relieve them. This chart here shows who relieved who. Saints only were relieved in this chart, and those are their families. I might die and leave my family, and of course, if I had children under age, they would be orphans, and when you helped Margaret, you'd help them, wouldn't you? So you'd be helping the widows and the who? The orphans. You can see that. Well, we're not obligated to go out and scour the country and look for people to take care of. Each local church take care of their own needy, or they find another church that can't take care of their needy, and they send fund to help that church, what? Provide care for the needy. That's God's pattern. That's the end of it. It don't go more than, it's not a worldwide mission to go out and scour the country to find it. All right, the next chart, please. Now then tonight, go down to the beginning. 2 Corinthians 9 and verse 13, I want to read to you, or with you. Verse 11 down through verse 14. We're going to answer, as I said tonight, some scriptures that brethren use arguments. When you make the argument I just made, here's the way they come by. They'll say, but Glenn, the church can just take care of the world's needy, take care of anybody. And they'll quote 2 Corinthians 9 and verse 13. And we'll look at that just a minute, we'll read the context. Now in chapter 8 and chapter 9, the context reveals that the help here was for those who were needy, that is the needy saints. And in chapter 9, he begins as touching the ministering to the saints. So chapter 9 is talking about ministering to who? The ministering, the serving here is to S-A-I-N-T-S. The collection in 1 Corinthians 16 was for the saints, and the ministering is to the saints. Now keep that in mind, because if you find somebody other than saints, then the collection wasn't taken up just for saints, and the ministering just wasn't the saints. The Bible specifies it was for the saints, the collection made, and to minister to the saints, that was rendered. All right, now look on down in verse 11 then. But being enriched everything to all boundless, which causeth through us thanksgiving to God. He talks about this work of ministering to the saints, and Paul said it causeth us to give God thanks. It caused those who receive the help to thank God, and caused us, the apostle, me the apostle, says us, including himself. Paul said, I thank God for it, and they thank God for it. All of us thank God for it. Verse 12. For the administration of this servant, not only a supply for one of the saints. Now, who's in need? Just the saints. You mean not other needy people? Oh, there's other needy people, but they were not included in the church's plan. The world is in need. But if you try to take care of the world's needy, how long will the church treasure last? About long as a June frost. You can spend your money before midnight, couldn't you? Taking care of the world needy. So that's not the duty. So he says, for the administration of this servant, not only supply for one of the saints, it not only does that, there's one. The first thing is it supplies and takes care of the wants or needs of the saints. But there's something else it does. Look at it. But it's abundant also by many thanksgiving to God. It causes thanksgiving to be given to God. Who does the thanksgiving? Let's read. While by the experiment of this ministration, they glorify God. They glorify God for your professed subjection into the gospel of Christ, for your liberal distribution, and unto them and unto all. The word men is italicized, and just simply mean that the word men here is not in the Greek, and man has put it in there. Now let's see, going ahead in verse, to see who they are, in verse 14, and by their prayer, whoever these them and all are. Here's them and all. Two words here. Here is the them, and here's the all. The them received the help, and the all gave thanks. While by their prayer, the them and all did what? Prayed and gave thanks to God for the help of the needy. Now, who are the them and the all that gave thanks? Do aliens pray to God, and are their prayers heard? John 9:31 says, God does not hear a sinner's prayer. But these prayers were being given to God. So here's the context. Now look at the chart. Who is the collection taken up for and administered to? 1 Corinthians 16 is for the saints in Jerusalem. Romans 15 for the poor saints at Jerusalem. Romans 15, Jerusalem to minister to the saints. Paul's going to go to minister to the saints. 2 Corinthians 8:4, 9:1, the ministering to the saints. What is the context, the exegesis of this passage? Now all of these show that the collection and the ministering was only to who? To the saints. All right? Now then the Greek word koinonia, that is pronounced, that is in Romans 15, when it's 6, it's called a contribution. In 2 Corinthians 8 and verse 4, it's called a fellowship. In 2 Corinthians 9:13, it's called distribution. The word contribution, fellowship, and distribution, all from the Greek word koinonia. And it means a sharing. The main idea of koinonia is a sharing that you have. So they shared what? Their money with other Christians. And so, who do you fellowship? Now think about that. Look here, question. Can a Christian have fellowship? That is a sharing or a partnership, literally participation with a non-Christian. In 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 14, said we don't have any fellowship, doesn't it? Doesn't have any fellowship. So look at this. A Christian does not have fellowship with unbelievers. If the all here is unbelievers, as the liberals tell us, it's the world's needy out here, then we can have fellowship with the world's needy. So it was a fellowship up here. The distribution, the fellowship, the contribution was all a fellowship with who? A participation. It was for them. All right, now look at the Greek word here again. The Greek word koinonia means a benefaction jointly contributed, a collection, a contribution, as exhibiting an embodiment and proof of fellowship. Here's the word all. The Greek word pantos, all. The men not in the Greek, of course. All is a substitute. Now I take this from Thayer's Greek English lexicon. Thayer said that all, the Greek word pantos, all, is a substitute and can only be identified in the context in which it is found. The context in which it's found is S-A-I-N-T-S, saints. Nobody else mentioned the context, is it? No aliens there. Look at that. And he says, it tells us that when all is used with plural nouns, as it is here, it means, quote, they are of the class indicated by the noun. Page 491. Well, who is the noun? The meaning of all in our context is determined by the connecting noun saints in verse 12. In verse 12 is for the saints, the ministering to the saints. There's your noun. The all is connected to the noun saints, so it's all saints. What you really ought to say here is, and can do it without any hurting the context at all, is that the collection was for them and all saints, in that they all gave thanks. Well, look at the context over here now. Here we have unto Jerusalem church. This collection was for, hold right there a little bit higher. This collection was for the Jerusalem church. Now in the Jerusalem church, not everybody there was in need. It's per among the saints. Some were in need. So over here on this side, the them is the per among the saints. The collection was for them, But it also did good in that all were benefited when these were relieved, and the others here couldn't relieve them. When they were relieved by contribution to them, that everybody of like, and all of them could give God what? Thanks. These received the help, and all gave God thanks. The two things. One, it relieved the wants of the saints, and two, it caused thanksgiving of all to God. See? And that's the point. So the context shows it filled up the want of the saints, many thanksgiving unto God, and their prayer for you. Now, who prayed on behalf of the donors or contributors? Was it saints in the praying, or was it sinners doing the praying? You find that out by what the Bible teaches about who got here. So that takes care of that argument. And we've had a debate, and they haven't even tried to answer that chart. Why? Because it's the meaning of the word. All right, the next chart, please. They say, well, but Glenn, Galatians 6 and verse 10 authorizes. Now they'll tell you this, that Galatians 6 and verse 10 authorizes a local church to build a benevolent society, for it to build a house to put the needy in. So look over here now. Here they say Galatians 6 and verse 10 authorizes this benevolent body here, this benevolent institution with its board of directors. Here's the board of directors. And it goes out here and builds a house to put the needy in. It authorizes this to do. So over here, this authorizes the church. This is the church. So it authorizes the church, or churches, to do this, to give to that. And it, in turn, does this. And that's they say, well, the Bible says, as we therefore have opportunity, let us do good to all men, and especially the household of faith. So they talk about then doing that. I want to see if this is talking about the church in its work or somebody else. What they fail to understand and make a distinction is that the church is not even involved here. The time is going by, I don't have time to go into detail, but I want you to look at it. The passage is here. In fact, in verses 1 through 10, the we and the us, in Galatians 6, 11 times you have the word we, us, and like pronouns. Talking about individuals, not one time does the word church appear. Every verse, verse 1 through verse 10, the context shows it's the individual to whom Paul is writing. And other passages, chapter 1, verse 4, he might deliver us, the individual. That we and the us in Galatians 2, in verse 3, chapter 3, redeemed us, the individual. That we might receive the individual. We are children, Galatians 4, 28. Galatians 5, 1, make us free, the individual. Galatians 5, 25, we and us. Galatians 3, 26, 27, we are baptized. Who? The individual. Did you baptize the church? You baptized individual into the church. And Galatians 5, 2 through 4, who's circumcised? You don't circumcise the church, you circumcise male individual. So all of these passages, besides over here, so in verse 1 through 10, who is he talking to? The local church or the individual? Well, the only one he's talking to, as well as the whole book here we see, is talking to the individual. Now, who is it? Church or individual? Galatians 6 and verse 10. We should let us, individual. It's error, therefore, to say let us, churches, do good to all men. For Paul said let us, Paul includes himself. Was Paul a church? Was Paul a church? He said let us do good. To say it's a church, you're saying that Paul is saying he himself is a church. But he said let us do good. Now the truth is, let us is individual. Let us, individual, do good to all men, because Paul was what? An individual. And so in 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2, the churches of Galatia were commanded to assist the saints, not aliens. Now the support of preachers. Galatians 6 and verse 6, individuals to support. But in 2 Corinthians 11 verse 8, churches, Paul wrote churches to take wages of them. And in Galatians 6 and verse 10, we find the individual relieved saints. But in 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2, we find that the church of Galatia also gave money. So what we're trying to do is a parallel. We find that both here. Here we find both. We find preachers supported both individually and by congregation. We find saints are taken care of both individually and by congregation. And even relieve aliens. Aliens can be relieved by individuals, but where's the scripture for the church to relieve aliens? So who is Galatians 6:10 talking about? The local church or the individual member? Why, it's the individual member, not the work of the church. So this doesn't authorize this at all. Or the next scripture, please. James 1:27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in affliction, keep himself unspotted in the world. Now, which is it? The individual, a Christian, or churches, local churches? It's error to say the individual, himself, the plural pronoun, in the local church. Because the same thing is found in 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 14. Show that an individual is not the church. The church is not one member, but many. The plural pronoun, himself, oneself, the New American Standard Version, refers to only Christian individuals. We see in 1 John 5:18, Romans 12 and verse 2, we find that the oneself, himself refers to that. So if any man in verse 26, and himself in verse 27, any man, himself, means a church, and man and we and us, Galatians 6:1 means a church, then what does man mean in John, that should be John 15 here. Put that in your mind. John 15, 1 through 6. The vine, hold it, the vine and the branches. John 15, 1, so turn to the chart here. Now, which is it? James 1, 18, 19, 20, 21, on down the line. We have us, man, your, ye, your, any, he, man, he himself, his, man, he, whoso, he, this man, his, keep himself. Now, all these verses talking to who? To individuals, not to the church at all. Now, in Galatians 6:1, here, man, ye, man, himself, every man, on, let him, man, he, his, he, us, we, all. Now, we refer to an individual. All right, in John 15, 1 through 6. Verse 2, every branch, ye are clean, branch, ye branches, he, a man. So if you're talking to an individual, if James 1:27, Galatians 6:10, means church, as brethren are arguing today, and I'll put this up here too. They say James 1:27, when you have a debate, they'll put these two scriptures up here on the chart, that these two scriptures authorize churches to build this, for them to do this. Now if that's so, then they can never meet a Baptist again in debate on the vine and the branches, and a man fall from grace. Because if a branch refers to only a man, not the church, which they admit does. We've always argued that in John 15, the Baptists and Methodists say that the branch, that is another church, the Baptist branch, the Methodist branch, the Lutheran branch, they say the branches are churches. But we point out that the branches are not churches, but the branches are individuals, a Christian. So if a branch refers to only a man, to an individual, to a Christian, and not a church, then why doesn't man, himself, and so on, refer only to an individual and not to a local church in James 1:27, Galatians 6 and verse 10. Now this chart, brethren, will stand. This is a parallel, Mike, all the way through. If this means individual, this means individual, and this means individual. If this means church, and this means church, then the branches are Baptist churches and Methodist churches and Lutheran churches, and they're right all along. We've been wrong. Get that, Roy? Brother, that'll lather. If I had time, I could make it lather a little more. But I got some more charts. Let me just take another minute, too. I want to get into the next chart, please. Now, here's a liberal position to man. If James 1:27, to visit the fatherless and visit the widows. Now, you've seen homes for the fatherless, and yet 99 out of 100 are not fatherless. They are not, that is, orphans. They have one or both parents living. They claim that 1 of 100 is all the people in these homes that really have no mother or dad. So they're not really, we shouldn't call them orphan homes because they're not orphan homes. But they're just home for neglected children. And it should be called home for neglected children, what they are. But they build them for these, but have you ever seen them build them for a widow's home? Well, here's one here. We might put her over one. Build her a good old widow's home here and put... we got one to start off with here. Why don't they build a widow's home? Just as much right for the churches here to build this board, have a benevolent institution, to go out and build houses and put the widows in it, and church take care of them, send contribution to it. Just as much right. But there's not one widow home among us. Why do they play on the children? Because there's sympathy, money. That's why. Get the money out of the old folks. Sure get out of those poor little old kids. poor little old baby just starving to death and looked at his little eye, his bug. They always show a little bug-eyed, big-bellied kid and about half naked. Look at that poor little kid, how he looks. Oh, he looks so bad. And they use that to get their money. Why don't they show some old woman with her teeth out and bent over and her back bent and her hair turned gray and say, look at that poor old woman, help her out and build a wood home. They're not consistent. They'll have the home for this and not the home for that. But if James 1:7 demand that you have a benevolent society to provide this and benevolent society to provide that, it authorizes church-supported orphanages, it authorizes church-supported widows. Now if that's so, then Matthew 25, 35, and 36, where it talks to the individual again. Now James 1, you remember, to the individual, and Matthew 25, the individual. But the individual here can be made the church. The individual here can be made the church. So look what the church can do. He says, feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, take the strangers in, clothe the naked, visit the sick, go to those in prison. You can go over here and authorize a organization, benevolent, build a man-made organization of the board of directors for them to build houses or to build restaurants and cafes to feed the hungry, and a water company to give drink to the thirsty. I have another little chart. I didn't get it made. Here's what I've got here. So here you have the restaurants, cafes, and dining halls. Here's the water company to have the water system and dig wells and provide free water. And over here, take the strangers in. You'd have the hotels and motels and settlement houses and so on. And clothe the naked. You'd have clothing stores, department stores, men's stores, women's stores, children's stores, and so on. Give clothes free to them, to support them, give money to them. And you'd have visit the sick, have church-supported clinics and hospitals and rest homes for the church's support, and let them have free medicine. And that's welfare. And those in prison, you'd have church-supported jails and prisons and penal farm to put the prisoners in, and we'd have to support that. Now, if this is talking about what the individual do. Since liberals teach that James 1, when it said authorize local churches to support orphan homes and widows' homes, and they don't have any, then what will stop them from supporting human organizations like this thing here that will build and maintain restaurants, grocery stores, and so on, water suppliers, motels, hotels, clothing stores, hospitals, clinics, jails, penitentiaries? Where is the stopping place? The very word that says visit here says visit these. Same word in English and Greek. If visit here means this, then visit here means this. If not, why not? Now, I venture to say it won't be long. In fact, there are already some Church of Christ clinics and hospitals overseas, and they're trying to get them here in America. And you watch out, Houston, Texas, probably the first place. They're trying it now. Hospitals. Why not? They might start some clothing stores or other things. So if churches can support one human institution, why not all? Hence, there's no stopping place as to what the churches could support with a liberal acceptance consequence. And we believe, let me tell you what we believe in. We believe in relieving widows, visiting, caring for orphans, neglected children, in visiting the sick, clothing the naked, entertaining strangers, and so on. But we do not believe that churches are authorized to build or maintain human organizations, support them to do these work, but individuals can do all of them and should do all of them. So who's causing division? Why, the promoters of missionary society? Is it the promoters of missionary societies, mechanics of music, benevolent societies, funding church, or the opposers? Why, if they hadn't brought the missionary society in, brought the music in, brought the benevolent society in, the sponsor in, there would be no opposition. So those who bring it in are causing the division. Rob don't have time. I had, how many more charts? 4 or 5 more? If you want to hear more about it sometime, just have a debate. You'll see all the charts. We've got about 100 of them. These are some of them. This is enough and sufficient tonight to show us and to help us to see. And let me just, in conclusion, read an article by Gene Britnell. Gene, back a few years ago, wrote a tract called Missionary Benevolent Societies Parallel. He says, one, both are rooted in the mind of man. Both are human organizations. Both are designed to do the work of the church. Both perform the work of the church. Both have a board of directors. Both have own constitution, bylaws, etc. Both solicit contributions from churches. Both accept contributions from churches. Both are human organizations to activate universal church. Both have to employ means and method. Both are operated by those who claim to be Christian. Both are justified by some as an expedient. Both are doing a good work. Both cause division of the church. Neither exists the divine authority to do with the church. Now, there's a parallel. If you can have one, you can have them all. There's no stopping place. So we would tonight that we look at this problem very carefully and always give book, chapter, and verse and emphasize that God made the church all sufficient to do everything He wants it to do. It's sufficient to do all the worship He wants it. You want to have a worshiping society? It's our singing society or baptizing society or Lord's Supper society. The church can take care of all this work of worship. The church can take care of all this work of relieving the needy, preaching the gospel, edifying itself, and does not need a missionary body, benevolent body, or edification body. Now we ought to be able to see this and thus appreciate God's wisdom and God's plan and God's power in making the church sufficient to do everything He wants to do. I've written down here about 4 things I'd like for us to notice before I close. And I said one time in a sermon back about 10 years ago that I preached that when people will deny that the local church can be its own benevolent organization, do its own work, they are guilty of one, reflective on God's infinite wisdom in preparing the church to do His work, His wisdom. Number 2, they also are guilty of setting aside the Lord divine organization, the local church, to do the work, the organization. Number 3, they're guilty of substituting another body, a man-made body, to do the work God assigned to the church. And number 4, they are guilty of robbing God of glory in the church. And are saying that the church is not all sufficient to do its work. This is the end of the series. If you'd like to listen to all the tapes, we have them all. And there's more information could be given. There's more charts, but we suppose that this will be sufficient for the time being and help us to see that we need to emphasize our duty to each one as individuals in the work of preaching, in the work of edification, and in the work of relieving the needy. And we need to emphasize what the church's duty is and do what the Lord says do. For when we stop doing what the Lord says do, then a man-made body will start doing it for us. That's why we got in the first place, because individuals and churches wouldn't do what God said do. That's why they were started. It's just a means of escaping our responsibility. Let's face up to our responsibility. Let's be busy in building churches, busy in caring for the needy, and busy edifying ourselves. We won't have this problem to worry with. May the Lord bless us in the study of His Word and keeping His will. If you're here tonight and not a child of God, you've learned through future study that you must believe the gospel and repent of your sin, confess your faith and be baptized, become a child of God. We bid you come while we stand, while we sing.